Okay. Okay. People. Good to see you all on our last class. I want to thank you for taking the class. It's been my privilege to teach you, and I hope that you've had a good time, or at least you've taken something away from the class. If not, then you have the evaluations. So, but also maybe some people could write some good stuff, so I know what I'm doing right. So don't forget about the evaluations. But yeah, it's been my privilege to teach you because you also teach me as students. You help make me better, so I appreciate that. And wish you well and wherever you go on the campus and Gwyn and Mercy in your courses. And if you're graduating, God bless you and have a good life. And so that's what I wanted to say. Someone asked, I don't know who, if I would go over and maybe do a review or a brief review of the final exam. If anyone has any questions. Yes, Ms. Purnell.
Can we do that first?
Well, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, we'll do it first. See how it goes. Basically the final exam, it's our only exams. Well, it's our only exam. We've had quizzes, but it's cumulative. And basically, if you've been, is that an advertisement? No, I don't want to play your app. All right. Too much, enough time for games. Anyways, it is cumulative, but if you've been taking the quizzes, you've been taking the final exam, basically. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so I'm using the questions that were given to you on the quizzes, so you'll see them again, so you can study from your quizzes if you've looked at the answers. Certainly use your notes as well. You can use your notes if you've been taking notes. Who knows? I don't know. I haven't been policing the classroom, but I'm hoping that some people have. So you have that. But you have the quizzes, you have your notes. If you haven't watched some of the lectures yet, if you've missed a class or two, then you might want to watch them so you know what's going on, so you don't miss a bunch of questions. And so everything on the quizzes, but also remember that we've had two classes, I think, since the quiz on Friday was open. So remember, you still have what I taught you on Tuesday and today that will show. I'll ask you some questions about that information as well. So that'll be on the final exam. So you might want to just be aware of that. There'll be a few questions about what I've taught on Tuesday and what I'm going to talk about today. Is anyone have specific questions about the final exam? You have all of exam week to take it. Or maybe I should say this. You have all of exam week to take it. I would say try to get it done early just in case there are any problems or issues, like your computer poops out or something like that, and I need to give you another attempt on. So try to do that. Try not to wait long on it in case there are problems. You have you have 4 hours. It shouldn't take you 4 hours, but I thought that I should give you significantly more time than just what I gave you on a quiz, because there are significantly more questions. There are 120 questions, and that's it. So, if you should only spend maybe a minute or so on each question. Some you'll go through very fast. Some might take some more time. So it shouldn't take you more than maybe, 2 hours, I'm hoping. And if a person has an accommodation, then you get less questions. I'll give you less questions and more time, obviously, according to your accommodation. Let's see. Okay. Any specific questions? I will not ask any questions about the syllabus, even though that was our first day of class, so I won't ask any questions about the syllabus. I will not ask any questions about Black History Month. I put that in its own quiz. It's an extra credit quiz that you can take. I sent out an email on that, so you can do that. Yes? That's it? Okay. Well, if you have any questions, shout them out. Well, don't shout them out, but raise your hand and I'll address them during the class if you want. Okay. We're back to India. Actually, it seems in some ways we've never left India. India is the source of a lot of world religions. You've got Hinduism, you've got Buddhism, Jainism, which I'm going to give you a crash course in Jainism today, and even Islam, even though Islam didn't come from India, it went to India and was there in India for a long time. And Christianity, which was actually very small, but has a longer history in India than Islam. Okay, but it didn't take on in India. I don't know why. So there's just some mantras and chanting from a Jain YouTube site. You can see the statue there of one of their leaders. It's not really a god, as we'll find out. It's in Sanskrit, I'm imagining, but I don't read Sanskrit, so. Jainism. What can I say about Jainism? Jainism. It's a small religion. It's a very small religion from India. According to the most current, I believe it's the most current census of India in 2011, there are only 4.5 million people who identify as Jains. And it's kind of like Judaism in a way, even though Judaism is also a very small religion. It's had a large impact on the world and on history. Jainism is similar in that way. I mean, Jainism hasn't maybe had the worldwide impact that, say, Judaism has, but it has been influential, certainly in Indian history, especially through Gandhi, a man you might have heard of named Gandhi, Mohandas Gandhi. And so what is it? Why do I have 600 to 400 BC there? I don't know why. Anyways. It's generally associated with this dude, Vardhamana. And when did he live? Well, the scholarly consensus is he lived in the 6th century. He was born maybe around 540, and he died in 468 BC. The traditional numbering or dating system puts him in the 500s BC. Okay, but scholars, think otherwise. He's from the 6th century to the 7th century, 6th century to the 5th century, and he's not the founder of Jainism, although in a way he kind of is, but he's not really the founder. There are actually a series of founders who are recognized by the Jains, and Vardhamana is given a title. He's called Mahavira, which means the great great hero or the great conqueror. Okay, so that's kind of like Jesus the Christ. All right, he's given a title. He's oftentimes not called Vardhamana. He's just called Mahavira by his followers. And as you can see from the dates, he seems to have been a contemporary personage, Ms. Reeser, of the Buddha. Yes, the Buddha, Gautama Siddhartha. I don't know if they knew each other, but they were certainly around at the same time, apparently. Jain stories about Vardhamana they're formalized, and they're probably unreliable, meaning they're not really very historical or useful for historical information, but they're all we got. So what are you going to do? Vardhamana is mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures as an opponent of the Buddha. I said I don't know if they ever met, but certainly in the Buddhist scriptures, they saw Vardhamana as kind of opponent, but as as a competitor to the Buddha's teachings. And we might notice some overlap in their teachings. And of course, they both came from India, so they make the same kind of religious assumptions, karma, samsara, moksha, these types of things. But their attitude is very different, and their solution is very different. Jainist sects disagree amongst themselves about some of the details of Vardhamana's life. Was he married or not married? One group says he was married. Another group says no. Did he have a miraculous birth? One group says yes, he had a miraculous birth, just like kind of the Buddha did or Jesus Christ did. Another group of Jains says no, he didn't have a miraculous birth. It was just a normal birth, okay? But after the death of his parents, Vardhamana, according to the story, renounced family life to become a beggar and an ascetic seeking liberation. Sound familiar? you know, which, was the common, process for Hindu men. Ultimately you want to achieve moksha, liberation, freedom. And to do that, the best way really is to eventually become an ascetic and devote all your time to reading the Vedas and studying the Vedas and fasting and doing yoga and meditation and all sorts of things like that. And so that's what he decided to do. He was a follower of the disciples of a person known as Parshva. And Parshva is one of a long line of people that the Jains recognize that are called Tirthankaras, or Tirthankar, as you'll sometimes see it pronounced. But I'll say Tirthankara, because I'm Western and I don't know any better. Which literally means a path maker, or a ford maker. A ford is like a path through a meadow. It's called a ford. But so I translate it as path maker to make it understandable. So one who shows the path or makes the path, a Tirthankara. And Tirthankaras, there are 24 of them, great Jain teachers who were considered guides to moksha. Okay, so you had this sequence of teachers, and Vardhamana, aka Mahavira, is the last of them, last of these Tirthankaras. So Parshva was one of them. So he was a follower of Parshva, or at least Parshva's disciples. Parshva was the 23rd Tirthankara, or the next to last. And Mahavira, or Vardhamana, take your pick, went about disputing and asking questions. Right there with you, Ms. Balser. I got you. Yes. Ms. Dennis, how are you? He went around disputing in a loincloth at first, and then he just decided to go totally au naturel and went around naked throughout India, throughout the region. And after 13 years of living as a naked ascetic, he achieved liberation and enlightenment. He reached a state of clear, unimpeded knowledge, and he became a perfected soul. So he was now acclaimed as Mahavira, and a Tirthankara in his own right, a path maker in his own right. And Vardhamana spent the rest of his life propagating his beliefs and gathering followers. He became what is called, and for Jains, a Jina, Jainism. Okay, the Jinas are the conquerors, those who have conquered the cycle of death and rebirth. Are claimed to be a line of teachers who proclaim Jainist beliefs throughout the ages. So take your pick. I mean, you could look at Vardhamana as a founder of Jainism, but you can also, Jains see him in a long line of teachers who are all really teaching the same thing. So I don't know, what did Vardhamana add to the party? I don't know, but whatever. He was, he I guess was the final bringer of Jain teaching. Whether these other Tirthankaras actually existed, we don't know. Scholars are pretty sure or think that Vardhamana was an historical figure. Parshva likely was also an historical figure, but going beyond Parshva, we're just not sure if any of these other Tirthankaras actually existed or not, or they're just part of the legend, part of the tradition. Mahavira organized his followers into communities of male and female ascetics, so monks and nuns. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. But also included lay people or non-ascetics, people who did not have approved status, one might say, in the community. They hadn't been ordained specifically as monks or nuns. Mahavira died by starving himself to death, and by thus starving himself to death, he entered nirvana, or the great rest. And here's a statue of Vardhamana, or Mahavira, the Jain caves in India. There he is seated in a yoga, we might say a meditative position, again, just like you'll see in Buddhism and also in Hinduism. So, meditating. And he kind of looks like the Buddha. If you looked at it, you might think it's the Buddha, or some Hindu god. I would think more the Buddha. But it's not. It's Mahavira, a statue of Mahavira. Alrighty. Why did I have that there? I didn't put that on my notes. Who did I? Hold on one second. There we go. Ooh. I just want to make sure. I have the Council of Vailabi here. I want to see. Oh, okay. I see what's going on. All right. All right. The sacred scriptures or sacred writings, do they have any? Well, it depends on which group you belong to. And I'll talk about the two groups in a moment. But it depends on, there are basically two groups of Jains. And, as with a lot of religions, what became the sacred literature, the writings, was passed on orally. And it had to be passed on orally because monks and nuns could not possess books. Apparently, creating books was forbidden, and you'll kind of understand why when we get into their teachings. But you couldn't possess books. But there was an attempt that was made at the council or the assembly of Vallabhi, which was held around 450 A.D., so a long time after Vardhamana lived, by at least one of the groups to construct a canon of sacred writings. But the other group did not attend because they believed that the canon was hopelessly lost. It was passed down orally, and as people forgot, it was so long ago, this other group of Jains were just like, it's been so long, people have forgotten the teaching, so it's just pointless. It doesn't mean that they don't have their own sacred writings. It's just that it's pointless to try to establish official sacred writings going back to Vardhamana. Nevertheless, if you are part of the group of Jains that believe in the sacred writings, then they are called the agamas, which is the general term for their scriptures or sacred writings, the agamas. And then out of the agamas, there are the angas, or the limbs, the thing like branching off from a tree. The angas, which are 12 basic texts that are accepted by these Jains as scriptures. But if you belong to the other Jain group, they certainly do have sacred writings, but they're not going back to Vardhamana. But they do have authoritative sacred writings, the Shvetambaras. I'll get into that in 1 second here. The 45 text canon. We'll pass on that. I don't worry about that. Actually, let me... well, I guess I'll go to the beliefs first and then go on to that. Maybe I will go to the two groups. I think I'll go to the two groups first because I'm going to be mentioning them. For about 200 years after Vardhamana, everything was fine in the community. But around 300 BC, there was evidence of division in the group. There was apparently a great famine in northern India, which led to an exodus, a movement, an emigration of large numbers of Jains to southern to southern India, excuse me. So, this was a terrible famine, which affected not just Jains, but Buddhism as well. It killed off a lot of the monks and people who would have known the scriptures or memorized the scriptures. And so there was a separation. You had northern Jains and you had southern Jains. And at a certain point, one of the southern elders or leaders returned to the north, and he had found that the monks up there had made some changes to the Jain religion that he didn't approve of. For example, the northern Jains started wearing a white robe. They didn't go around naked like Vardhamana did. And they also started to disagree. There was a disagreement between the two groups about whether all personal possessions, even clothing, should be abandoned in a spirit of passionless detachment, okay? Just like with Buddhism, you don't want to be attached to things. You want to be detached, and Hinduism as well. And I mentioned that there was disagreement about the Jain canon of scripture. Well, this is the story, okay? Again, is it historical? Who knows? I wasn't there, but that's the explanation of how these two groups developed. But two groups did develop, called the Shvetambaras, or Shvetambars, and the Digambars, The Shvetambars are called from Shweta, which means white in Sanskrit. So they're clad in white robes, so they're the white clad or white clothed. And then the Digambars, who I guess are the more conservative group, following more closely to the example of Vardhamana, are the sky clad because their only clothing is the air, the sky. They go around in the nude. So that's one of the most distinguishing characteristics between the two groups. The Shvetambaras wear clothing. Their monks and nuns will wear clothing. And the Digambars will not. They go around naked pretty much all the time. I think in the Shvetambars, at least in the temples, the monks will be naked. But when they go outside the temples, they'll wear clothing for the Shvetambars. But for a Digambar, no. They typically go around naked. The Shvetambaras will use a bowl when they go out begging for food. Again, notice the connection with Buddhism. That's a daily activity of Buddhist monks too, that they go out begging for their food. They use a bowl for begging, whereas the Digambaras will not use a bowl. The Shvetambaras believe that a Jina, a conqueror, one who has truly achieved liberation, still needs to eat something to stay alive, whereas the Digambars think that no, once you've reached enlightenment, you're past the need for physical things like food, so you don't need to eat. Women can attain moksha according to the Shvetambaras, but the Digambars say no, a woman has to reincarnate as a male in order to achieve liberation. The Shvetambaras accept the Agama scriptures. They accept that they could construct a canon going back to Vardhamana or the other two Thankaras, but the Digambars, again, more conservative, say no, it's been lost forever. So they reject the Agamas. So those are essential differences between the two. This guy, you can obviously, I think, tell is a Digambar. There he is. I appreciate that the photographer decided to at least say, okay, let's shoot you from this angle so we don't have to see his bits. But anyways, they're there. He's fully naked. And he has not a fan, a duster, like a feather duster, which is also kind of a symbol of Jainism because you use that to sweep the ground in front of you because we want to make sure that you don't harm any living creature, and so you don't want to harm insects or any bugs that might be on the ground. So typically Jain monks and nuns would be seen with like a feather duster to dust the ground in front of them as they walk, so they can be sure they don't walk on any other living thing. Okay, so now that I've told you about the groups, let me go back to their teachings. Well, they also have the three jewels, just like Buddhism. The three jewels are a little bit different, though. Whereas in Buddhism, it's taking refuge in the Buddha, in his teaching, and in the community. The three jewels are reinterpreted by Jains as having correct knowledge, knowing the correct things about the world, having correct belief or right faith, and then acting on that faith correctly, having right conduct. So it's knowledge, faith, and conduct are the three jewels for them. And the essential aspect of their religion is this idea of ahimsa. Make sure I didn't... here we go. Which is translated as non-violence, not doing violence to any living thing. Again, that's shared with Buddhism. That's also shared with Hinduism as well. That's a major premise of the Indic religions, those that come from India, non-violence to other things. Okay, that's a good thing. I think that's a true development. But it differs, of course, how you interpret that. With Hinduism, obviously, if you're a kshatriya, a warrior, then violence is your stock in trade. It's part of your dharma. So you have to reinterpret what ahimsa means. For Buddhism and for Jainism, they're maybe what you could say more extreme about it, truly not harming any other individual. But even Jains go farther than that it's not just another human being, but it's any living creature at all. So anything that's animate or has a jiva, a spirit. So bugs, insects, trees, stuff like that, which could also be considered living things. So injury to a living being causes bad or harmful karma, which is why it's to be avoided. So, as part of or an extension of ahimsa, a Jain should typically be a vegetarian. And it's interesting because I love Indian food, and I have a local Indian restaurant that I go to. And I remember one day when I was going there to pick up some food, I noticed behind the cash register that they had a Jain menu specifically. Okay, and I said, "Oh, that you have specifically for Jains," because of course Indian food, they eat meat. Okay, it's not vegetarian. Meat is part of it, although ideally you're not supposed to eat meat. Even with Hinduism, you should avoid meat. Buddhism, you certainly shouldn't eat meat because it involves killing the animal. And certainly with Jains, no. So they have to have a specific menu for them at this Indian restaurant. So there are certain professions that Jains cannot do. So you can't be a farmer because you have to plow the soil. And that might involve killing insects as you uproot them. And also if you see the earth as a living thing or creature, then you're doing harm to the earth. Certain occupations like metalworking and carpentry because you hurt the metal in the wood. So Jains were traditionally associated with businesses or occupations involving finance or trading, money lending, banking, those sorts of things. It's a monastic religion like Buddhism. There's a lot of overlap with Buddhism. And it's, you have the regulars who try to follow it, but, if you really want to follow Jainism, just like with Buddhism, you have to become a monk or a nun. And so you take certain vows, and there's an intricate system of vows that initiates a regular person into the deeper practice of religion. You take basic vows of ahimsa, nonviolence, truthfulness, chastity, which doesn't mean you don't have sex. It means, but you don't misuse sex, the sexual ability, detachment. And then there are helping vows, assistant vows that help you live out these things. One of those vows, helping vows, might be the restriction of travel. Traditionally, you're not supposed to travel because that involves, again, movement. You might step on something. You might step on a bug, or flying through the air. So you're taking an airplane. You might have a bird fly into the engine or something, I don't know if anyone I don't know how far anyone got into the syllabus, if anyone decided to read into Jainism before this. Did you read any of the articles on Jainism, the newspaper from the New York Times? Maybe? No? Anyways. Well, one of the articles from the New York Times is about this Jain leader who actually brought Jainism he's kind of famous for bringing Jainism to the West and to the knowledge of Westerners who didn't know that there was this Indian religion called Jainism, and they kind of like its values of nonviolence and stuff like that. And it also isn't very heavy on gods and things, so people like that as well, because you don't want a god telling you to do this or not do that. But anyways, and actually he established a temple up in my neck of the woods in New Jersey. And but the problem is, and this is related in the article from the New York Times, he actually is seen as kind of maybe a heretic in some ways because he actually violated Jain teaching. He traveled, he took a plane over to North America to help build this temple, which you're not supposed to do. It's one of the attendant vows, the assistant vows. You're not supposed to do that. That's one of the reasons I think that Jainism is such a small religion and really hasn't grown out of India, because you're not supposed to move around a lot. Okay, I'll pass over that. So that's one of the founding things. If anyone knows anything about Jainism, they know about ahimsa. This idea of ahimsa was very influential on someone like Gandhi, who was an Indian man, and his idea of opposing the British occupation of India, but doing it non-violently, without any violence at all. What other beliefs do they have? I did that. Whoops. I mentioned the word jiva, and you have jivas and ajiva. Jiva could be kind of seen as your spirit. Same idea comes from Hinduism. You have your Atman, which is your personal self. But your personal self has to relate to the phenomenal world, to the world outside of it, and it does it through its jiva. That could properly be called a soul, I guess, if we wanted to put it into Western language. And so your jiva is in your body, and it's kind of like any animate being has a jiva. It's the difference between animate and inanimate. I got you, Mr. Irwin. God bless you. So something that is an animate, sentient being or substance is a jiva, has a jiva. And non-souls, those are inanimate, like I guess you could say a stone is inanimate, would be ajiva and not have that. And And the jiva is bound to samsara, to the cycle of death and rebirth, through its karma, its karmic bondage. And this is the universal law governing the effects of one's good and bad actions. Again, like Hinduism, but very much unlike Hinduism, where karma is interpreted as consequences. For Jains, they take karma literally as a thing. Karma is a particulate matter, a fine and subtle substance that sticks to the jiva and weighs it down. And that's why it can't be in nirvana, because nirvana for Jains is a place. It's at the top of the universe, at the roof of the cosmos is where nirvana is. And your jiva can't float up there. Your jiva, which is weightless, cannot float up there because of all the bad karma, and even good karma, you might say, which is weighing it down, this matter, karmic matter. So it adheres to the jiva as, for example, clay to a pot. Clay is the image used. So selfish actions, those that are attached to the illusory world, lead to the accumulation of heavy karma, which weighs you down. While good karma also is matter, but it dissipates almost immediately. So it's lighter and it doesn't stick to the jiva as much, and it dissipates. So effort, discipline, knowledge, again, jnana, knowledge, the way of knowledge, helps peel off the bad karma, and moksha is then achieved by freeing yourself from the karmic matter, and which will allow the jiva's natural lightness to float it up to the top of the universe into nirvana. And that's how you break the cycle of death and rebirth. There is no, and that's moksha. There is no real focus on gods. Are there? I think they recognize the existence of gods as a level of being, but gods are not a big deal in Jainism. They're not something that you pray to or have devotion to. You certainly have devotion to the Tirthankaras. The Tirthankaras are not really gods. They're kind of god-like, but they're not gods. So there's no creator, there's no world soul or Brahman as there is in Hinduism, no sustaining force. There's really nothing beyond the jiva or the self. There's no savior God that's going to help you achieve nirvana. You have to do it yourself. And even the Tirthankaras are merely guides. They're path makers. Okay, so it's quasi-atheistic. I think they still do recognize gods and goddesses, but they just exist. Like there are demons, they just exist. They're part of the realms of being. And the gods really don't care about us. They just don't have anything to do with us. They're different beings than us. We have to deal with what we have to deal with, which is karmic bondage. So it's kind of a pessimistic religion in that sense, that the world is a place of utter misery and sadness. It's not the most positive message, I guess. And the epitome of this pessimism is that the ultimate goal of Jainism, or of the faithful Jain monk or nun, is to ritually starve yourself to death. This is called santhara. Where a person will take a vow to achieve complete liberation, complete detachment from everything, which means food and water, and Got you, miss. God bless you. And the result of and they inform people. I mean, it's which in our culture sounds kind of weird because a person, one of the indicators of suicide is if a person like has a plan. You ever hear this? If you know a person who has a plan, they start saying goodbye to people, they start giving stuff away, they seem depressed. These are supposed to be warning signs of a suicidal ideation. You're supposed to refer them. You don't want to help them out, refer them to a counselor, somebody. Not in Jainism. Let them go. In fact, they celebrate it. The person tells you, I've made this vow, Santara. I'm going to stop eating. I'm going to eat less and less and less. And eventually I'm going to starve to death. But it's okay because I'm achieving moksha. My jiva will float up to nirvana. I'll be totally detached of all those things that are keeping me here. So if that's not pessimistic, I don't know. Pessimistic view of the world, I don't know what is. In fact, it is controversial. It's not controversial for Jains, but it is controversial in India because several years ago, the Indian Supreme Court ruled that it was a violation of the law to allow people to do this. And Jains came out in force. They were out in the streets protesting this, saying, no, this is part of our religion. This is part of our religious practice. India is a secular country. We're supposed to have freedom of religion. You can't do this. And I think they might have reversed it. But anyways, I have some articles on it. I don't think I had you. God bless you, miss. I think I did put it as one of the articles. Yeah, from the New York Times. Also one of the readings. If you want to look at it, it's on under the assignments. I think it's in the readings. No, it's in the readings on campus if you want to look at it. Yeah, this was several years ago. So this caused kind of a big controversy in India where Jains were supportive of it. This is part of our religion. This is what we do. Ooh, excuse me. Okay, here's an image created by a Jain, I believe. Public domains, thank you. Which just shows the different types of jivas. Samsari jiva, notice transmigrating souls. Samsara, cycle of death and rebirth. And how do they determine the levels of jivaness, I guess? Well, we start with, these are immobile beings, so we have trees. A tree is apparently a jiva. It just has one sense, but it's 4 vitalities, 4 living things. It has a sense organ of touch. I guess I don't know how you. I don't know how you know. You can't really ask the tree. I mean, I've touched trees before and haven't asked their permission, so I hope I didn't violate anything about. Well, the tree didn't take me to court, so Anyway, sense of touch. They have bodily. They have energy. They respire. They breathe. That's true. Trees do convert carbon dioxide and oxygen. They have a life duration. Moving up the jiva ladder, we have mollusks and things like that. Things like shells, and they have these things, but they also have a sense of taste and an organ of speech. Yes, when I've talked into a shell at the ocean and heard a voice, I didn't think it was talking back to them, but I guess a clam has a mouth, Hello, So anyways, looks like a mouth, I guess. Maybe they thought it was a tongue inside. Now we get up to insects, who have 3 senses. Not all insects are apparently equal because ants do have a sense of smell, but I guess they don't have a sense of sight. So they don't have the same sense that, say, millipedes have, or grasshoppers, or spiders, which doesn't make any sense because they have eyes, so of course they have sight. But anyways, and then we're going up to the 5 senses, which are without mind, but they have a sense of healing. So snakes. And then the highest level, as you can see, is our human gentlemen there, beings capable of reasoning, which they have mind. Interestingly enough, in Jainism, we're on the same level as elephants. Elephants always remember, don't they? Apparently they have better memories than human beings. From what I understand from people who've seen things on TV and people who study elephants do seem to be highly intelligent. They do things and have little rituals that they do and stuff like that. I wouldn't want to get in the way of one, especially if it were angry. Or I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of it, especially if it's the poop chute. You know what I'm saying? But they're beautiful creatures. So apparently, human beings and our jivas are identical for Jains. Okay, so you certainly don't. These are all the things that you don't, because they have jivas, you don't want to hurt or to harm, even though they're of different levels. I mentioned the fact that they use a feather duster. Also, Mr. Clyde, the Jains were big on the masks before we went mask crazy as well a few years ago. Remember that? Yes. Anyways, because a lot of Jains will wear masks all the time, and that was in fact before COVID, one of the distinguishing features about their religion. You could kind of pick out a Jain in a crowd or a person who's possibly a Jain because they'd be wearing a mask. Why? Because you don't want to inadvertently suck in an insect, which can happen if you're walking around and sometimes a bug or a fly flies into your eyeball or flies into your mouth and you swallow, you just can't help it. And that became your lunch for the moment, You don't want to do that if you're a Jain. That's bad karma. You harmed a living creature. And you just initiated some karma for yourself. Bad karma. Okay, this was my little trip that I took to the temple in New Jersey. And, I didn't want that to cover up the other thing. Hold on a second here. Change the animation here. All right, compress instead. Here we go. All right. There we go. Ah! All right. Well, anyways, I'll try to show. Okay, so this is what their statues oftentimes look like. They're kind of white with gold and all sorts of stuff on them. Gold embossed, I guess, or the way that gilded, I should say. And this should tell me at the bottom. Yeah. Okay. This is Bhagwan, which means like Lord. It's kind of like the Sanskrit word for Lord, and then it says Parshwanath. So this is Parshva. This is Parshva. Oh, I think that's why I have it, because does he have a snake behind him, depicted by him, kind of like with the Buddha, the snake behind his head, okay, when the Buddha reached enlightenment, okay. So this is one of the Tirthankaras I took a picture of. And walking around, I took some symbols. The swastika is a very common symbol, not just in Indian religions, but also Jainism. You'll see it all over their temples, and it's a good luck sign. It means to give good karma to the building or whatever. So it's not a bad thing. The Nazis took it from India because the Nazis and their crazy theory were descendants of the Aryans. Remember the Aryans who invaded northern India or emigrated northern India, who, of course, for the Nazis were white, were the bringers of culture and whatever. So they took this Indian symbol of what they thought was of the Aryans, and they used it for their symbol. But you'll see it all over the place, as you did in their temple, which I took a picture of. No fire, food, or money at any tonk. A tonk, as far as I can tell, is what their word for kind of like a shrine or a temple to a god. They have different shrines on the land. It's actually supposed to be an exact reproduction of a Jain shrine over in northern India. That's what this monk or this guy came over to India to help found this shrine. So the tonk. And it has different tonks or shrines around it. So, food or money, these might be seen as bad things, defiling things. And when you enter their tonk or their shrine, and that's kind of covered up by that picture, but let me... Okay, you can't... Let me make this bigger. They have a bath, or like a shower. Can you see that there? Okay. Like a bath where you can cleanse yourself before entering, okay? Because you're not allowed, like, look at the puja thing here, the sign. There's a sign for people. Let me get this out of the way. these out of the way. Bath and puja. Puja is an offering. Okay, so it's the word for an offering that you would make to a god or goddess. So even though it's quasi-atheistic, you do still make puja to the statues of the Tirthankaras. You'll offer them fire or flowers. They'll still kind of wash them and bathe them and stuff like that. But you have to cleanse yourself. You have to take a bath, a ritual bath, and you have to wear the correct clothing before touching the idols, because if you touch them without having cleansed yourself, you defile them. Think of this, remember Islam. Remember when I talked about Islam, that's part of before you make salah, you're supposed to wash your hands up to your elbow and wash your feet and wash your head. So there's ritual bathing. In Christianity and Judaism, we have ritual baths. For women when they menstruate in Judaism, we'll take ritual baths to cleanse themselves. And Christians, of course, use that to induct people into the religion. So it's a common idea. Do not move the small idols, so you don't move them around. Do not keep your feet on the platform during puja, maybe because your feet are unclean. Feet are usually defiling because they're dirty. No food and no leather items in the temple. Obviously no leather because you had to kill a cow to make the leather, probably a cow. So that would be offensive. I'm not sure about what kind of food they mean. I don't know if they mean animal meat or flesh meat, or do they mean any food at all, because sometimes during pujas they do give out food to people that are there, little rice cakes and stuff like that. And anyways. No yoga or other exercises in the temple. Okay, so you can't perform yoga in the temple. Maybe the Tirthankaras don't like that. They don't want to see people doing exercises. Who knows? Especially, I've seen people in those yoga pants, and sometimes they don't fit very well. You know what I'm saying? No non-Siddha Chalam bolus or other solicitations. Okay, so it's called the Siddha Chalam is the name of it. I don't know what bolis are. I don't understand what that is. But no solicitation. So, unless you're not here to pray or make puja, then the Jehovah's Witnesses can go somewhere else if you're not interested in doing the puja. But imagine if you saw this outside a Catholic church or a Christian church where maybe it said, and sometimes you do, other religions have rules like this, but, you have to, some religions, you have to enter the sacred space appropriately. You have to be dressed appropriately. Women cannot, have showing bare arms or showing leg, that's considered sexual in some places. So, women have to have their heads covered, men have to have their heads covered in some places. Certainly have to be ritually clean, stuff like that. So that I just thought that was interesting. I thought I'd show you those pictures. All right, I mentioned that. Okay, I mentioned that. All right, so I guess I'm done with that. If there are no further questions, I think I'm done with Jainism, this little crash course, and I'll let you go early. And if you want to stay and ask me questions about anything in the course, be my guest. But have a good day. God bless you all wherever you're going, in life or in the university. Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen sometimes where he's just sorry. Thank you. I've seen the pictures of him, like we saw occasions. There were pictures of him in the city doing himself, but you see in other places, it's sort of like a larger, happy-go-lucky.
Sometimes they depict the Buddha in the different stages of his search for enlightenment. So you'll see some Buddhist images, the Buddha meditating, and he looks like he's almost starving to death. This rib cage, and that's supposed to show. You're welcome, Miss. And I think that's supposed to show that stage when he was ascetic. He was looking for enlightenment, but wasn't fine. Thank you, Miss. Have a good day. Good day, lady. Good day, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And then, you have these cultural images where this shows the Buddha happy and fat, okay? And I think that's trying to show...
Thank you.
Have a good day, Miss. Thank you. I think that's trying to show the enjoyment body of the Buddha, that he is a blissful, and so they're trying to show what culturally would show that, so that the person is well fed, the person is smiling. And a lot of times in the Buddha statues, they show him smiling as well to show that he's in bliss when he's reached enlightenment. So I think that's what's going on there.
Okay, yeah, because I was talking about it with my girlfriend. She had that question. I need to give her a good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I hope that's correct.
I'm not going to double check all mine. Don't take your word for
And,
it.
and if I'm wrong, let me know, please, because I always want to learn too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Professor.
You're welcome,
Enjoy
sir.
the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Yes. Oh no, I was just listening in what you guys are talking about.
That's fine.
But have a great summer.
You too, sir. Enjoy yourself.
Thank you too.
Mr. Hale, you're back, Mr. Man. Well, I didn't talk about Buddhism. So I didn't talk about it. Alrighty.